Today on American Strangeness, El Paso's Buried City and the King of Bilk, Part 3, Berson Gets Stung by the Bee. By early 1887, Dr. Leo Berson had moved on to Sacramento, where he once again posed as a clergyman and opened the Pasiglassic Polytechnion Institute. That's a mouthful. He promptly advertised for a number of young ladies to act as secretaries and typists, but those he hired quickly saw he was disreputable and left. Berson ultimately hired a young man of means as his secretary, draining this new acolyte of funds. Local community and church leaders saw through Berson's deceptions, and soon the Sacramento Daily Bee would expose Berson as one of the most polished rogues that has ever disgraced California, and one of the biggest liars outside of a dime novel mill. The Daily Bee kept its crosshairs on Berson, publishing multiple articles over the next several months revealing the latest schemes of the educated, unscrupulous rascal who the paper at one point likened to an evil genius. Like other newspapers across the country, the Bee dug into Berson's history and sourced testimony from other reporters and community leaders of whom the doctor had run afoul. One article featured F.H. Wing, a rubber stamp manufacturer in Sacramento, who claimed that Berson entered his business with plans to market a miracle drug and needed stamps, only to later shoplift half a pack of bristleboard cards and attempt to defraud on payment owed to a local printer for circulars. The Bee practically painted Berson as a doomsday cult leader who held sway over music shop owner John F. Cooper with Mephistophelian influence. Berson lodged with Cooper and his wife, serving as a tutor for their children. The merchant is the hourly companion of this consummate scoundrel, who feeds and clothes him, who pays his bills, and who seems to be proud of the glorious privilege of being bled, wrote the Bee. Berson is continually inflaming the already excited brain of his victim with wonderful stories about the end of the world, and very often he gives weird and mysterious elucidations of what he claims to have been divinely translated to him. According to the Bee, Berson had gathered a deluded flock who he convinced the world would end in 6 months with only 144,000 souls that could be saved. This salvation could only happen in Jerusalem, so Berson urged his followers to sell all their possessions in preparation to follow him to the Promised Land, although each should first give their would-be Messiah 1/10 of their savings. Cooper would deny these allegations about his children's live-in tutor, stating the attack on Berson was an error in nearly every instance. It did not represent his views, and the apocalyptic claims were just overdrawn and exaggerated accounts of Berson's religious lectures. The Bee would later report that Cooper's wife had ejected Berson from their home, and that Berson's subsequent living arrangement at Hembry's boarding house ended when he was kicked out for non-payment of rent. The Bee remained firm that it was dedicated to exposing Berson as a warning to citizens. Every word can be substantiated, the paper stated. Desperate diseases require desperate remedies. By October 1887, Berson had had enough with the Bee's dogged attacks on his character. He filed a complaint for criminal libel against the paper, resulting in the arrests of managing editor Charles K. McClatchy and business manager Valentine S. McClatchy, the brothers whose family's media empire still exists today as the McClatchy Company. Each brother faced 3 charges of libel, which came before a judge on October 13th. Berson surely regretted his attempt to silence the Bee, as his wealth of misdeeds was showcased in the courtroom. As the defense read the articles to which Berson was objecting, he squirmed upon mentioning of his telling a well-known attorney that he intended to blackmail a former roommate with an accusation of stealing books in order to persuade the wealthy young man to settle and avoid criminal charges. "If the court will consent," Berson interjected, "this item I don't wish to prosecute, but only that portion of the article referring to the ejectment business," referring to his eviction from the Hembry boarding house. The defense detailed a history of allegations against Berson via local witnesses and letters from people he had wronged in other cities. Fred Day, the Sacramento printer who Berson had attempted to stiff for an order of circulars, took the stand. A letter from a Professor Jackson of St. Louis described how Reverend Archibald Alexander went by many names and produced fraudulent letters of endorsement, gained the trust of the academic community, and bought furniture on credit that he never paid off. I would not trust this man in a matter of religion, morals, or money, and, from what I have seen and heard of him, have no hesitation in denouncing him as an unmitigated scoundrel. Let every man and woman beware of him, wrote Jackson. A Dr. Thorne of San Jose described Berson's time there with the traveling charlatan known as Madame Duflot, the French doctress. After Duflot left, Berson proclaimed himself her successor and swindled many people out of various sums ranging from $25 to $250. He was soon arrested for practicing medicine without a license. Berson enlisted a bail bondsman to pay the $100 bail and then fled town. Mrs. L. Thomas, manager of the San Francisco Marriage Bureau that Berson had contacted to find a wife, testified that Berson had offered her a position as matron at his 36-room college in San Diego and invited her daughter to transfer to the college from her school in St. Louis. Thomas asked the man in San Diego to investigate, and the report came that the college was more like a chicken coop. She further asked a lawyer to investigate Berson's activities in San Diego and learned that he had left with a bad name and owing several bills. After Berson mentioned he knew Professor Jackson in St. Louis, Thomas contacted him and learned that Berson was likely the fraud, Dr. Archibald Richard. It was Thomas who had advised Kate Grant not to marry Berson. When the defense attorney said that Berson's withdrawal of the blackmail charge was an admission of its truth, Berson explained that he didn't find fault with the designation of himself as a fraud, scoundrel, impostor, bilk, or blackmailer. The incredulous Judge Buckley questioned this statement, but Berson let the allegations sit unchallenged. Berson similarly demurred when asked repeatedly if he had gone by any aliases. When the judge ruled he must answer, the plaintiff said he had gone by Leo Berson most of his life, but had 3 or 4 names because of his religious neophytism. While Berson wheezily admitted to knowing Jackson, he wasn't sure why Jackson, the editor of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, or any of the other various letter writers would have it out for him. Berson said he had only left St. Louis because of the severe winters. Cooper, who had 2 weeks earlier filed for divorce from his wife, was only one of a few witnesses to support Berson. The McClatchys' attorney argued that every allegedly libelous accusation had essentially been admitted by Berson, if not directly, then by his refusal to answer. Charles McClatchy stated that whatever has been published concerning Berson has not been through malice, but as a matter of news which the public had a right to know. The judge agreed, along with the facts that nearly every witness and correspondent testified to Berson's fraudulent acts, of which he made no protest, and that the report about Berson's eviction from the boarding house was proven to be accurate. There was no case, and the judge ordered the prisoners discharged. Utterly defeated and humiliated in court, Berson appears to have moved on from Sacramento, but he eventually turned up in Mexico, reviving his old tricks and inventing new ones. Next time in Part 4, New Country, New Schemes.